Hello, I'm Eve Makis, writer in residence at NTU's Post-Colonial Studies Centre. I want to thank you all for joining our Formations event, the second in a series of 2 interviews presented under the title of Politics of Disappearance. The first was on Thursday with the journalist Sevgul Uludag, who has dedicated her life to finding missing people. And tonight's pre-recorded interview is with another inspirational woman, the artist Mirna Bamieh. She founded the Palestinian Hosting Society in 2017 as an extension of her artistic practice, an initiative that seeks to save Palestine's forgotten foods through a series of narrated dinner performances. I'm especially grateful to Mirna for speaking to us from her home in Ramallah at such a difficult time in her home country. Please feel free to forward comments during the interview. I'm sure Mirna would be interested to read them. Mirna Bamieh, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us as part of NTU's Formations programme. And now you are the creator of this amazing life art project called the Palestine Hosting Society that connects people to the culture, the history and the geography of Palestine. It sounds like a wonderful life-affirming project, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about it.
So my work in art since my very early starts in 2009 has been around politics of disappearance. I used to do mostly installations, video installations, but starting 2016, I started getting more and more interested in live art practices and mostly around performance. And for me, what that shift happened because I needed to create works that focus on the aspect of encounter with the other. So in 2016, I created a series of performances that were called Potato Talks. And then in 2017, I started getting more and more interested in food, and it was mostly because of political reasons. And although my project, Palestine Hosting Society, is around food, but the research, the core research of it is connected to my practice, my overall practice around disappearance. And the food component is the addition to this research.
Yes,
In 2016, I was in a residency in Tokyo, and I was producing a huge production, like a video installation with sound and I remember at that time it was really the political aspect in all of the world was really harsh, and I was thinking myself, what can I contribute as an artist to communities and to society, to Palestine, and it felt like I needed to create a shift and to say something in a medium that's closer to my heart. And I thought, okay, so maybe I think of a medium that I love as much as art, and it was food. And I started learning cooking in Tokyo, and then I went back to Palestine after 3 months, and I enrolled in a culinary school, and I started learning, the language of the kitchen. And midway through my diploma, I realized that there is a real need to tackle the aspect of food in Palestine, because it's mostly at that time in 2006, it was not as well spoken about as now. Palestinian kitchen is. And I felt that my generation is the generation that has lost most of this knowledge. So I started asking people and women and historians about what is Palestinian kitchen. And then every time I was conducting this research, I realized that when people talk about food, they somehow revisit the aspect of the political with fresh eyes, and you get stories, and you get those intimate voices that narrate history in a way that has not been exhausted and used a lot all over me. So I created this project mostly because of this need, because I needed to create a space where we talk around food and we present it as a medium to rewrite history through a lens that has not been overused. And it's fascinating, since that time till now, I the narratives that food brings forth is they are warm, they're intimate, but as well they're very important, and they have something to say to the way politics have been written, to the way history has been written, and for now and for the future. So it's not only about the past. The main focus in my research is recipes that are less known in our current time. So I call them disappearing recipes, because their names, their stories, their ingredients sometimes, they somehow are withdrawing from the present moment. And what I do is that I bring those recipes, I bring those stories, and I reactivate them over dinner performances, installations, films, different aspects, food mapping, different ways. And usually the research starts with one topic that I want to learn more about. And this project has been a learning experience for me. That's why, like, usually the trigger is something that I want to learn more about. For instance, the wild edible plants in Palestine, in the mountains of Palestine. I did this research in 2019, and at that time when I started the research, I had the curiosity, but I didn't have the knowledge. So for 3 or 4 months, I was just going to the mountains, meeting people, learning the names of plants, reading books, meeting men and women, and taking walks in the mountain, but as well cooking in the kitchen, and asking about the uses of different plants in the Palestinian kitchen. And after that, like intense period of research, I created a menu. And that menu tells the story of those 3-4 months. Usually the menu is 14 courses and is presented to a group of people, usually between 65 and 70 people, over long tables, 1 or 2 parallel tables. And the food is presented for the people over a period of 2 hours. And I'm there telling the story of those courses. So the menu is the structure for the performance over 2 hours. And people are there eating and listening to the story and engaging in different aspects with what is presented. So that's mostly how the research happens.
That's brilliant. I mean, I've crossed off about 15 of my questions there. So thank you very much. So it seems to me that what you're doing is sort of reclaiming the past so you can pass it on to the future. I mean, were you always interested in your own culture, or did that come in a sort of unexpected way?
So I think it was quite a journey. I was not always interested. Actually, my generation is the one that had witnessed Oslo, and they saw the shift, and they saw the dream and the fall of the dream, and they left. They lost hope in political solutions and resolutions. So I remember when I started, me and people like in the late 90s, no, not late 90s, in mid 2000s, I think Palestinian art, and me including, we were trying to define our practices in relation to our identities without the Palestinian aspect, because the production of art before that was so much into the political, and it felt like a burden for my generation. So we were trying to create art that is more focused on the self and tries to push away the political. We wanted to define our identities without the political rhetoric. And I think the more we matured and the more we grew up, we realized that it is inevitable, that what we were doing was the definition of, we were creating political art by trying not to create political art. So I think after those approaches, and that's why if you look at my earlier works, I was literally trying to make things disappear, memory disappear, the body disappear, the land disappear through different projects, and see what is left after the removal and erasure of those concepts. What is left of the space? What is left of identity? What is left of the land? And I think I realized that that what I can do, and my resolution for that aspect, after trying to make so many things disappear, is that to go back to it and somehow have that part of my art practice to define, that maybe I will not be going back to identity politics like the generation before, but maybe my generation can actually rewrite history in reclaiming traditions. And it's not only me, there's many activists, there's many artists, there's many young people are going and reclaiming agriculture, they're reclaiming food, maybe they're reclaiming notions that have been suppressed or considered traditional for a very long time. But by going back to that, we are trying to rewrite what does it mean to be Palestinian, to be an active Palestinian citizen, contributing to community, but as well trying to recreate the image of Palestine to the world in a new way. And I think that comeback to what is considered traditional is because we lost hope in the political, and we want to recreate the notion of belonging and identity in a new way that is not only receptive to what political powers are dictating to us. So you now see people really going back to basics, going back to the land, going back to food, and reclaiming this indigenous knowledge that is almost, disappearing.
Are there inspirational cooks in the family?
I mean, food in general is a very passionate topic for Mediterranean people and for Arabs in general. That's why I think I chose the perfect medium to talk about hard topics that are related to time, to history, to politics, and to stories, because what interests me are the narratives that come out of the kitchen. So I think I have the perfect medium. Absolutely. And I love food and I love cooking, and that's why I chose food. It's because it's my passion even before I realized that it was my passion. Since I was a kid, I was always in the kitchen with my mother, and my mother got married really young, and she started learning cooking while we were growing up. So the space of the table was always active in our house, with new recipes, with discussions around food. And my mom would always ask us how we like things, our opinion of what to add or to omit in the next recipe. So it was a topic of discussion in our house. And my mom is Lebanese. She's not Palestinian. And she left Lebanon, and my grandma was not able to visit her after 86 because of the total separation between Israel, like the occupied territories, and Lebanon. So, those visits were not allowed anymore. And I remember as a kid, my grandma used to visit us, and, the house would be, like a playground of ma'moul, the semolina cookies, because she makes the best. She would be teaching mom how to make certain recipes. And then after 86, that was no longer possible. And we have photos, I don't remember those things, but we have photos of our kitchen with my grandmother. And then my mom was constantly trying to create this link between her kitchen and her home country all the time with food, but as well by by exploring her identity as a woman, with her friends, with new recipes that she had never cooked or tasted before. So it was very related to the everyday life, and it was a playful medium. You know, like recipes were not only the way your mother made them, but as well new recipes that you are creating, because you heard about this recipe from your friend, and it becomes the topic for their gatherings. And they used to have many gatherings.
I'm really struck by the idea that in your house it was a performance. It was performative. You know, it was like your mother was asking for feedback. She was trying to sort of perfect these recipes as she remembered them, maybe, or even to sort of claim them as her own. So I think I can see that would have been a reference for you as a child, and you know, subliminally, you know, that's something must be something that's informing your work today.
This curiosity to ask questions around food, and
it's normal.
And because my mom was not, you know, like growing up, my mom was not a great cook. I mean, she always like had a talent, but I witnessed my mom becoming a good cook, you know. So it was not, you know, this aura of the good cook who knows how to do all the recipes.
Well, can I ask you to name one of the dishes that sort of stands out for you, and talk me through the process methodically?
So the recipe that I will take you through its making is Bezalel Kharoub, which is carob. Kharoub is carob, you know, the wild carob pods, and Bezalel, it's actually the action of mixing wheat with oil, with fat. And actually, this recipe is very interesting on many levels. Again, it's very simple recipe. It's ancient, and it almost disappeared. And I presented it on the table of wild edible plants, and I remember it was one of the beautiful moments for my project, because I just was reminded of the value of what I do. And I remember presenting it as the last course, and then there was a man at the audience, and, you know, I was presenting it one by one because it's the last course, and, you know, people take one ball of the carob molasses, Bezalel, and he just stopped. And then he couldn't believe it. And he told me, how did you find this recipe? I have not tasted this Bezalel since I was 5 years old. And there's actually a photo that I can send you of that moment, because luckily it was documented. And he's an old man, you know, he's not young. And for me, that was a moment that reminded me of the value of what I do. Just bringing this taste now to a man who didn't taste it since he was 5 years old. And Bezalel is very easy to prepare. So you basically take wheat or semolina, and you roasted it a bit on the stovetop, and then you mix it with olive oil. Just like, you know, like you make the olive oil enter into the flour, you add carob molasses, and you add sesame seeds, and you're ready. You just like keep kneading the mixture until it doesn't stick in your hands anymore, and then you turn it into balls. So those are ancient energy balls, basically, that people used to take with them when they needed to go to pilgrim from Galilee to Jerusalem. It does not go back with time. It's full of energy and calories, so it helps them do the journey. And actually, the reason that the recipe disappeared is because the Galilee land stopped producing sesame, so there's no more sesame fields like before. The carob molasses and carob trees are less and less than before. Olive oil production in Galilee as well has been greatly affected. So the reason this recipe, and wheat as well, like we turned from a country that was self-sustained when it comes to wheat to a country that imports wheat and flour. So those ingredients disappeared. That's why this recipe has disappeared, and less and less people prepare it. So that's the carob molasses psise.
Thank you. Also, could you tell us about louf, which I believe is a poisonous plant, which probably isn't used anymore, but it was in the past, and you've discovered how it can be made edible.
So louf is the scientific name of it is Arum Palestinum. And this, it's a wild plant. It's magnificent, and it has a beautiful flower that's monstrous. Even it's black. It's huge, and it grows in the shade in the mountains. In the Palestinian kitchen, we had many recipes for it, but we stopped making this plant, or making it less and less, let's say, because we lost this knowledge of how to turn this plant from poisonous to a plant that's really good for the body. And even this plant and the water from boiling it has been used to cure cancer patients. So it has a huge health benefits. So first of all, you take the plant, you cut the stem so you only have the leaf, and then you rub it with salt overnight. You leave it in the salt, and then you wash it. And while cooking it, you have to use lots of olive oil, and you don't use the olive oil all at the same time. You add it gradually, and you keep stirring it over for 1 hour. So it takes quite a while. And there's many recipes for it. Some add tomatoes and onions to this leaf. Some add tahini. Some add maftool. Some make a soup out of it. Some people dry it and then use it to make a soup with wheat dumplings. It's very tasty, especially that this plant protects itself. That's why it has a bite to it when you cook it. It has a very interesting texture, and the taste. I mean, it's really one of the tastiest wild plants for me.
How do people respond to you when you go to these villages or these regions and you start asking questions about food?
So at the beginning, I need to spend time with them and to explain my interest, because for them, they don't understand. Like, why are you interested in those dishes that we no longer cook? And why are you interested? I mean, you're young, you go cook pasta, you know. Why are you interested in those stories? Why are you interested in those dishes that sometimes take a long time to be cooked, or a very certain season where you can cook them to gather the ingredients? Why are you interested in those stories? So at the beginning, I have to build trust with them to tell them more about my project and why I do what I do. It's value for me and it's value for people. And little by little, I gain their trust, and I see how their faces transform. And I believe it's because once you give value to a knowledge that a person has that didn't know that is valuable, something in their faces lights up, in the way they sit shifts, and they take me. You know, I stopped trying to prove anything, and they they open up this treasure of knowledge to me, and sometimes they direct me to other people as well. And usually when I want to know more about a certain dish or because I'm from Palestine, I live here, so I just ask, I ask, and people lead me to recipes. So it was never hard to find recipes, but usually I need to ask the right question, or I need to go to the right place, maybe to dig deeper into things. And because sometimes I want to reach for a recipe, but I don't know if it exists or not.
Yeah.
I know that there's something there, but I don't know if I will find the person to give me this recipe or that knowledge. And I'm talking about recipes that grandmothers and grandfathers know. It's not mostly the mothers. So I'm talking about the generation that was born before 84, and so it's I feel sometimes like I'm racing with time, because I need to reach those recipes with the people where they're still here.
So you're racing with time and against changing geographies. Would that be fair to say?
I mean, there's many recipes why those recipes are disappearing or on the verge of forgetting, because the map keeps getting reconfigured throughout time, from 48, before that, even with the British mandate. It keeps changing, and sometimes you don't understand why did this recipe disappear? And the answer sometimes it's because the people who used to live in this location no longer live there, or maybe this land has been the lands, the farmer lands in this land has been confiscated, and now there is building instead of it. That's why we lost produces like the sesame and the wheat, for example. And you know, the movement of people has been always an issue with the way food was moving. So when Palestinians in 1948 were forced to leave their hometowns and leave Palestine or go to other areas in Palestine, some recipes moved with them and some recipes did not move, because the availability of ingredients for those recipes were not available anymore. And it didn't stop in 1948. In 67, that was as well, this mobility issue was again, but as well in the 2000s. And as you know, many Palestinians do not have the free right of movement, so they need special permissions to go to Jerusalem or to go to the Israeli occupied areas. I can move to Jerusalem. I can go to the West Bank, but we all cannot go to Gaza, for instance, because there's a closure, there's a siege, and Gazans cannot leave and go to other parts of the map. So it's the movement is an issue, and with that, sometimes recipes are the only way for people to go back or to create those connections with their homelands. When they move, those recipes move, but not all recipes. Some recipes do not move, and those are the recipes that I want to find, you know, and understand why did they disappear. Was this ingredient no longer available? Who used to cook it? Are there certain families that no longer live there, and with them this recipe disappeared? And there's different reasons why recipes disappear. But as well, modernity is another reason. This disconnection of people with the land, you know, with seasonality, with farming. Made so many recipes less available, and some recipes need a gathering, you know, they need a group of people to sit around at a table and make it together. And now when you have smaller families and less community to do that action, some recipes decide to leave. So yeah, I mean, there is a story for each recipe, really. There's reasons, but there's very specific reasons for each recipe and its disappearance, and that's what I look to find in my and to collect in my project.
And have you got plans to host more of these performances, and where?
You know, I was hosting many tables in Palestine and abroad until COVID happened. I managed to do one dinner performance in Brussels last September, and that was the only performance that I did last year. This year, I'm opening a show in Warsaw around fermentation, because that's another aspect that interests me in my practice. Because in my practice, I'm focusing on Palestinian recipes, but not only. I'm as well like interested in fermentation cultures and their stories all over the world, not in only in Palestine and the Middle East. So I've been working on that for 3 years, and I'm opening a big installation next July in Warsaw. I have some projects happening in New York. I'm interested now in pottery and the history of pottery, the disappearing history of pottery in the region, and I'm making that part of my performances. So I'm combining those two histories around performances.
Have you got any plans for a recipe book? Because I think you should.
Yes, but not now. In a couple of years.
Last question. What dish puts a smile on your face? What sort of quintessentially Palestinian?
It's a hard question to ask. My favorite dish, and I'm always excited when I eat this dish, and whenever I travel, and I travel a lot, and I come back home, this is the dish that mom makes for me when I arrive. It's not a disappearing dish, luckily, and it's called maqloube. And it's layers of rice and vegetable and meat. Each region has its own recipe and its own vegetables that add to the dish. My favorite is the one with eggplants and lamb, lots of garlic and rice and spices. So you layer that and then you flip it when it's ready and you have kind of a cake with rice and vegetables. It's so tasty and it's so rich. And I like to eat it with yogurt and a fresh salad. So it always puts a smile on my face because I like to eat it the way my mom makes it for me. So it's a love dish for me, and it will always be my favorite.
Have you got an Instagram account? Is that the Palestine Hosting Society?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's an Instagram account for the project Palestine Hosting Society. And it's one way of making this archive of recipes active by sharing it with people all over the world. That's why I mostly share in Arabic and in English. But as well, it's one way of reaching Palestinians all over the world and to to connect and collect recipes. I remember when I was working on a Gaza kitchen and Gaza table. It was one main source of research for me because I was reaching people, asking them for recipes, cooking with them over Skype at that time, and like asking questions of how to make this Gazan knafe that I've never tasted. So it was a really very active platform for me to reach recipes and reach Palestinians all over the world and places that I cannot access.
Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Mirna for sharing the details of her wonderful project. I'd certainly love to be a guest at one of her events. Up next at 4 p.m. is a screening of the film Tolerance with a discussion on queer resistance and post-colonial studies.